Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Samantha Johnson, and I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement at the University of Colorado Boulder's Leeds School of Business. Leeds is a top business school offering undergraduate, MBA, MS, and PhD programs and has an alumni network of over 41,000 strong living and working around the world. We're excited to have Dave Hekman presenting on overcoming biases to advance the underrepresented workforce for today's webinar. A few housekeeping items before we begin. First, if you have any questions now or during the presentation that you would like to ask Dave, please send a question through the chat interface. I will monitor questions as they are submitted, and Dave will respond to them at the end of the presentation. As a reminder, for optimum audio quality, we do have everyone on mute except for myself and our speaker. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please notify us through the chat interface and one of our support specialists will touch base. Lastly, a link to access the webinar recording will be sent to all registrants later today along with a survey link. Now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Dave Hekman is an Associate Professor of Management and Entrepreneurship at the Leeds School of Business. He is focused on improving organizational health by examining remedies for pervasive workplace, racial, and gender biases. His research has been published in a number of leading journals, including the Academy of Management Journal, Organization Science, Journal of Applied Psychology, and Journal of Business Ethics, and has been featured in a number of media outlets, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, and National Public Radio. Welcome, Dave, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. Glad to be here. Yeah, welcome everybody. This is going to be fun. We're going to talk about bias in the workplace and diversity, and let's just get going. All right, so here's the outline. We're going to first talk about that there's a business case for diversity, but nobody cares because we have unconscious bias. So I can give you stats all day long about the logic behind it. But it's really hard to believe. Maybe we can believe it for other places, but it's hard to believe for our own company. And then how do we overcome these unconscious biases in ourselves and others and actually increase workplace diversity? Okay, so then once we get that figured out, I'm going to give you 4 tactics to increase workplace diversity. But that's not enough. It's like getting the best players on your team, but if you don't pass them the ball, then it's pointless to have them. That's the inclusion. And so we'll talk about how do we get inclusion, not just diversity, but inclusion. All right, so let's go. Let's highlight here's the business case that nobody cares about. Managers are 38% in 2015 at least said, hey, there's this talent shortage. But if you look at the fine print there over in the right side, maybe I can use my mouse. That's cool. So only 1 in 20 is looking to enhance benefits or increase starting salaries, so pay more money. 5% that's 1 in 20, are redefining qualifying criteria. 1 in 5, they're providing additional training and development. Only 1 in 10 are going after untapped talent pools. That's women and minorities. So really, what are they saying? There's 38% here who have a talent shortage of HR managers, but they're really saying it's a white male shortage because only 1 in 10 are actually going after untapped talent pools, women and minorities, and these are there's a lot of talent in these pools, as we'll see here. Here's the one slide on the business case for diversity. Companies in the top quartile of gender and racial diversity outperform the bottom quartile by 15 and 35%. The 15 is for gender and the 35% is for race. Why is it? It's because if we sample from 100% of the population, we're going to get better people. See, if we just sample from the 35% that are white men, we're going to get the best out of the 35. We're not going to get the best out of 100. And so the gender talent pool is more tapped than the racial one. That's why we get a bigger boost here for race rather than gender. Same thing here. The 3% is for in sales boost is for gender and 9% for race diversity. If you have a team member that looks like your target customer, you're 158% more likely to capture them. I mean, it makes sense because you know that person has a better idea of what the customer actually wants. Diverse companies are 70% more likely to capture new markets because you have new ideas, different people. And every 10% increase in gender diversity is a 3.5% increase in actual earnings. And investing in companies with women on the board, it leads to 36.4% greater returns. That's even with one woman. Same thing for restating earnings, which is unethical behavior. It indicates probably unethical behavior if you have to restate your earnings. If you have just one woman on your board, you're much less likely to have to restate earnings. So, and the logic, again, it's simple. You draw from 100% of the population, everybody, you're going to get better people. You draw from 35%, you're going to get the best out of the white guys. All right, here's one about, so that's just like overall talent, like the talent pool. This is kind of how does a diverse team actually perform better than a homogeneous one? This is ideas. So over on this axis is the quality of your ideas. Up here is the best ideas you have, and this is how weird your friends are. So the weirder your friends, the less like you that they are, the better the quality of your ideas. And the idea behind this is that, if you have one really smart person with one perspective, that's not as good as having two average intelligent people, or three average intelligent people, or four average intelligence people from different perspectives. You're going to get a better insight. You're going to solve more problems. You're going to have better ideas. But yeah, as we know, nobody really cares. They're like, yeah, maybe that's true in general, or in theory, or for academics, or for some other industry, but not for my industry, not for tech, not for banking, not for whatever industry we happen to be in. And so, yeah, 2016 study of tech founders, only 23% think diversity will help them and improve their bottom line. It's risky, right? It's like, well, I don't know. Really have somebody different on our team? Even though diversity should help tech people probably the most. You think about it, they have to pivot an average of 11 times before they actually find a viable product or service. If you have diversity, you're going to be able to pivot. You're going to have more ideas for pivoting. You're going to be more able to pivot. But yeah, it seems like, the gut reaction is, diversity is scary. Like, it might hurt me, rather than the logic that you can see. You draw from 100%, you're probably going to get better people than if you just draw from your buddies. And yeah, this is funny. LOL, 56% of men think sexism's over. We fixed it. Women, don't worry about it. It's all fixed. Kidding. This is the slide that kind of gets people to wake up. Oh, wow. There are more David CEOs than women CEOs. And my name's David. So I have good David leadership skills. Don't you just kind of feel a little better, though, with the David running the show? All women, though. So Davids are about 1% of the population, and a little more than 1%. Women are right around 50%. So there's something weird about Davids, right? And my brother's name's John. He'd be a great CEO, too. But Johns are like a little bit, a higher percentage of the population than David. So still, it's crazy, right? Like 3% of the population is 10% of the CEOs, and half the population, women, are just 4% of the CEOs, which indicates we're oversampling Johns, Davids, Roberts, James, Michaels, Williams, and undersampling all the women and anybody who's not got a waspy name. And so this is like, okay, we can talk about glass ceiling all we want, but this shows it, right? It's like, this is the problem. We're not taking their top talent from everywhere. All right, but we have this unconscious bias. I'll read this statement. The rock star was unhappy with the amount of alcohol at the party. You could shout out if you weren't muted. I'm sorry. But basically, what's happening here? There's not enough alcohol, right? And then you read this one. The nun was unhappy with the amount of alcohol at the party. Whoa, there's too much alcohol. Then you got, after weighing all the circumstances, the CEO decided to terminate a few employees. Okay, fire some people, that's no big deal. So we know what rock stars are like, we know what nuns are like, we know what CEOs are like, and now we know what drug dealers are like. After weighing all the circumstances, the drug dealer decided to terminate a few employees. That means tap, he's going for the kill shot, he's got the gun sideways, right? That's what we know. And I've had students say, hey, this is racist. Like, where's anything about race in here? The CEO could be African-American female. The nun's probably a female, but it could be Latina. Rock star is probably, we think, guy, right? Long hair, like I think of white, blonde rock star, like old school 80s. But so we have these stereotypes about what these people look like. CEO's named David. Drug dealer we know, nun we know, rock star we know, and so we can interpret the exact same words differently. when we think of a superhero in a live audience, hey, think of a superhero, almost unanimously you get Superman, right? Like that's the first one, and then it's like, okay, think of a pro athlete. Michael Jordan, LeBron, Steph Curry. So you think of this white male superhero, you think of African American, or at least most people do. And in fact, over 85% of NBA players are African American. Here's our Denver Nuggets, the Nuggies, the Nug Nugs. And so we think, African American, we think pro athlete. But did they think that back in the 50s? No. I mean, this is the championship team. This team actually won 51, 52, 53. This guy over here, the coach, of course, he's named John. His name's Whitey. Not kidding. Maybe he's albino or something, but he's like their star point guard. Whitey Skoog from Duluth, Minnesota. All right. They actually, you know who this team beat? This team, they're grainy because they're second place. New York Knicks. This is the first African-American, Nat Sweetwater Clifton. They call him Sweetwater because he likes soda. They had 2 Jewish players, 1 African-American. Here's their coach. He's a huge diversity champion. But they lost. They lost 52 and 53 in the finals to Whitey. Literally Whitey. And so you can see, like, diversity sucks, right? I mean, this is proof. But if I was to tell this coach, John, in the previous slide, I'm like, hey, John, I'm from the future. 20 years from now, you're going to wish half your team was African American. That's the future of the NBA. He'd tell me I was crazy. He'd be like, well, look, we beat the African American player team, Knicks, over. We win. We're the best. The Minneapolis Lakers win. And so that's what I'm saying we are with CEOs. That's where we are with leadership. With sports, it's actually a lot easier to tell who's, we have points, rebounds, player efficiency ratings. And so we don't really care skin color. I mean, we want the best player. Like, we can measure it and count it. With leadership, it's like, oh, the economy's bad, the team was bad, I had a bad support, I had a bad this. It's not my fault. Something external happened. And so we can have bad leaders persist, and that's kind of where we're at. But I'm saying we're at the 50s of leadership, and it's all changing, and we know it's changing because we want to sample from the full population and level the playing field. Okay, so yeah, it's a base rate problem. Sure, we have a leaky pipeline and all that stuff, but it doesn't mean it's a problem. It's like, well, we don't have any CEO material, people getting promoted into leadership who aren't a white man. It's not really true. And there's some stuff we can do, even if it is a total, like, only 90% of senior vice presidents are white men, which isn't the case. We can still do a lot. So here's the 4 things. BAMs. It's blind it, admit it, measure it, and support it. So the first thing is blind it. So we all know about the orchestras in the 70s. They had fewer than 5% women because it's like, wow, men are just better at professional musicianing. And today it's in the 30s. They just put in a curtain for the auditions. And then they had everybody take off their shoes or use a carpet so you can hear the click, click of the heels. And yeah, it worked. So companies are using blind auditions to hire top talent. It's working. And now let's take a quiz. If we can all just, you should see it on your screen.
Yep, great. So I've gone ahead and launched that poll. So the question is, imagine the exact same piece of code gets uploaded to GitHub by the following users. Which user will get the worst ratings? And it looks like we've got a few folks who have answered, so we'll give it a little bit more time.
So yeah, is it going to be Coder 555 or Coder Guy 555 or Coder 555 who's actually a woman, or Coder Girl 555? Who's going to get the worst?
Awesome, and we've got about 70%, so we'll give it a few more seconds here to get some last folks to answer. And we'll go ahead and close here. So Dave, it looks like the response is overwhelming. So 83% say that Coder Girl 555 will get the worst rating, and then and that's 83% of folks feel that way. And then it looks under 10% were the answers for the rest. Coder 555, who is actually a man, Coder Guy 555, and Coder 555, who is actually a woman.
You guys are so smart. You're like, that was super good. You aced it. Yeah, it's D, Coder Girl 555. Here is, looks like women code better than men if no one knows they're women. So women actually score, women's code tends to be accepted slightly more than men's, but basically the first three options, Coder 555, who's really a man or a woman, or Coder Guy 555, those get pretty good ratings. But as soon as you know, oh, it's Coder Girl 555, then it goes down to 62%. So that drops about 10%. So everybody else is right around 70%. And women are actually, yeah, so women are 71%, 71.8 if it's gender neutral. So if it's Coder 555, who's actually a woman, but then as soon as it's Coder Girl 555, 63. So that's kind of crazy, right? We just assume, well, we know, men are better at playing music in the orchestra, men are better coders. It's just not true, right? You blind it, you get a surprising result. Okay, so then here's my field, academics. Basically, I get about 7 to 9%. Each article I publish gets me toward tenure, about 7 to 9%. I do have tenure, so I'm safe. But if a woman publishes with me, it counts as 0% toward her tenure, because everybody knows I did all the work, even though the opposite is probably true. And so, isn't that weird? But if a woman publish only with women, they get their 7 to 9% boost. And then this journal, not all journals are blind reviewed. So this one switch, behavioral ecology, switched to blind review, and the number of women first authored papers increased significantly. There was a control journal. So it wasn't just a great year for a female ecologist, it was just the blinding it. We assume women are less competent. That's the main stereotype that affects women and minorities as well. Okay, so we blind it. And oh wait, did we do quizzes on that? It's quiz time. Sorry. So we gotta. I'm really curious about this.
Sounds good. So let's go ahead and launch it.
Yeah.
So what % of new hires at your company result from a blind ranking of applicants?
In other words, how many, what % do you actually use blind ranking? I think it's pretty rare. I just did it with a faculty search this year, and it was crazy. We could have gotten our top 5 applicants. 4 of the top 5 were women. The fifth was an Asian male. We didn't. The highest ranking white male was number 9th, but he got all the flyouts. He got all the job interviews at all the other schools. And so, literally, we got our top 2 applicants. We hired them both, 2 women. But it's
awesome.
rare.
And it looks.
Mark on that. Go ahead.
So it looks like we've got just about everyone has voted. We'll give it a few more seconds here. All right, so I have some answers for you, Dave. It looks like, so 91% of individuals answered 0 to 20% in terms of blind ranking of applicants. 8% said 21 to 40%, and it looks like there are a couple folks out there who have more than 80% of their applicants.
Wow, that's awesome. So yeah, so most of us are doing exactly that, not the blind ranking. Then let's do the next one. So where are we getting our new hires? Can you do the next question, Sam?
Yep, absolutely. So the next question here is, what percentage of new hires at your company result from referrals from existing employees?
Yeah, so I'm guessing this is going to be higher, but I have no idea. I think this is how really academic hiring goes. This is how every place I've been, most of it's from referrals, but I would imagine tech is more about referrals. Finance, I would think most places are about this. So you have an answer?
We do. So it looks like we've got just about everyone has voted. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out here. And so the results are in, and 21 to 40% is the highest. So
Okay.
44% of individuals answered that. And then coming in second is 41 to 60%
Okay. So about
result
half.
from referrals. Mm-hmm.
About half. Okay. So less than 20% from blind ranking, and then half from referrals. That's pretty fascinating. Good job. Super good. And okay, so that's the first. I think so. Blinding it will get us more diversity. That happened with this faculty job search I was telling you about. Citigroup does it. They blind it, but then they have this problem. They send these like, so they take all the names and if it's African American, traditionally African American university, they take that name off the resume. Then they send the top applicants to the hiring manager, and the hiring manager is like, what? This is just a bad fit. Of course it's a bad fit. That's the whole point of diversity, is like you get a different perspective. Like maybe the financial crisis wouldn't have happened if it was a bad fit. I mean, there's two types of fit. There's complementary and supplementary fit. And supplementary is you get more people just like me, my buddies. And complementary means we get a different perspective with different skills. And so, yeah, here's this great Leo Tolstoy quote. Try to pose for yourself this task. Try not to think of a polar bear, and you'll see that the cursed thing will come to your mind every minute. Okay, so try, right? You can't not think of a polar bear if you're trying not to think of a polar bear. That's how our brains work. It's called ironic error. To not think about something, you have to think about it. And so that's what happens in the interview stage. So in the selection phase, you want to blind it. But then when you get these people who are whatever quote unquote bad fits in the interview stage, you want to admit it. And so here's some really cool studies. Well, I'll get to those in a second. But basically what happens is you get these sour lemon face, the negative facial expression. We've all sat in an interview and somebody's looking at us like, I do not like you, or that's the feeling we get. So that makes the interviewer perform worse. And that's what these Citigroup hiring managers were doing. It's like, what? How did we get this person, right? And then a double standard. So if you're a white guy, you get the benefit of the doubt. So just like avocados, let's say one looks kind of bad on the outside, but you crack it open, take a bite, and then you're like, it tastes bad. Throw it away, right? You throw it away. But if it looks good on the outside, tastes bad on the first bite, you give it a second bite. And so basically, white guys get the second bite. They get the benefit of the doubt. Whereas if you have a different outward appearance, then you're going to get tossed out easier in the job interview phase. So here's the studies I was talking about. Here's one my co-author Stephanie Johnson did. It's a really clever study. She had these women come in, for this typical construction manager job, and in heels, and the whole time the actual hiring manager is like, does she know this is like construction industry, like cat calls, and I mean, does she know maybe she doesn't know she's a woman. That could be it. Should we tell her she's a woman? No, you tell her she's a woman. She might know. Does she know? I don't know. And so and then they don't even pay attention during the interview. They rate the interview really low. This isn't right. But all they had to say when she walks in is say, hey, I know I don't look like your typical construction worker. It's like, oh, she knows she's a woman. That's so great. Okay, now we can actually listen to her and we can talk to her. And the women were rated much higher in the job interview phase. Another similar study was with a scar on the face. This actor, he used like Hollywood makeup to put a scar on his face for one condition and no scar on the other condition. And then they did eye tracker software, exact same thing. People would just, with the eye tracker, stare at this, but like out of the corner of their eye when he had the scar on his face. And then if he said, hey, by the way, you probably, like when he first walked in, if he just said, hey, you probably didn't notice this, but I have a gigantic scar on my face. And they're like, oh, really? We didn't notice. Stare at the scar. Oh, this feels so good. I want to just stare at your scar. I love your scar. Oh, please, just one more second. Can I? Then they'd be done. Okay, we stared at the scar. We're good. Now we can talk to him. Exact same thing. Just call it out. Name the dynamic, right? It's like, hey, I know I'm a woman. Hey, I know I'm a minority. I get it. I'm the Jackie Robinson of leadership. Trust me, or whatever. and then it goes away. And people are like, oh, okay, I don't have to not think about this I don't have to try to be colorblind. None of us are colorblind. None of us are gender blind. It's like it hits you right in the face. How do you not? It'll just drive you crazy if you pretend you are. So that's blind it and then measure it. And then admit it, then measure it is the third thing. So Intel CEO gets a weekly summary by sending either encouraging or not encouraging notes to people. Phillips 66, we did a talk there. They actually have a dashboard where it's like, hey, we have, 50% of applicants are women and 20% are minorities. Hey, let's and then look at this. Only, of the people who go through the process, the interview, first interview, second interview, final job offer, accepted offer, they can see the numbers drop, right? And so that changed. They increased their percentage of women hires by 19% in 1 year just with the dashboard. Measuring it, right? It works. So you blind it, you get which will give you the random pool sample of all the best out of the 100%, not just the 35. Then you admit it in the interview so that people can actually make it through that interview stage, and then you measure it to see how they're doing. Then, Ellen Powell, she did get fired maybe for this at Reddit. Doesn't negotiate salaries because that only helps men. When men negotiate salaries, they get more money. When women negotiate salaries, they get the offer rescinded. And so, and also Massachusetts stops. You can no longer ask about salary. Why would your past salary have anything to do with this job, right? It's like this job is worth a certain amount of money. If you can do it for that amount of money, great. If you can't, see you later. Because men typically come in with higher salaries, and so then that just perpetuates the pay gap. Okay, so then here's another study we did about two in the pool. Basically, it's like using the status quo to change the status quo. If this is CU hiring data, actually, if there was ever a time when with just one woman faculty hire and 3 men, that woman was never hired for a professor job. It's like, well, it'd be crazy not to hire a man. We got David and we got John, we got Steve, or do we need a woman? I don't know, not this year probably, maybe next year. And same thing with minorities. If there's 3 white, 1 minority was never hired. It's like the norm, the status quo is pick one of the 3. Just like on the other end, if there's 3 women or 3 minorities, then there's a chance. Even just going with 1 more, then it's not like this one woman speaking for all women. It's not a token. It's, hey, do we need Linda who's good with stats, or Susan who's good with writing, or David who's good with words, or John who's good with numbers? What are we looking for? They become a person, right, with actual skills and talents. And so that's why you see this effect. You can really we love the status quo, but you can use the status quo of the final sample to actually get an outcome that works for diversity or works for your goals. Then the last thing is support it. Here's Medtronic CEO. Medtronic's a big local company. Key Bank has great leadership support of this. It's brave, though. I mean, to say we want diversity. Even let us reassure everyone, Medtronic holds inclusion and diversity principles as irrevocable priority. This was after the election. And it's especially risky for women and minorities to say this, because it's like, yeah, of course you want diversity. You're selfish. And so that's one of this other study I did with my co-authors. The responsibility for this goal can't be placed solely on the shoulders of the people who are going to be crushed by it, the women and minorities. So here's an HBR. It's a huge opportunity for us white guys to be champions of this, because when women and minorities promote diversity, they actually get dinged with worse competence ratings. They're viewed as incompetent. Socially competitive. They're just trying to get their group advanced. If you're a woman, of course you want diversity because you want more women. You have your little women party. If you're a minority, yeah, you want your bros, whereas if I'm a white guy promoting diversity, it's like, huh, what's his deal? He's kind of weird, but doesn't really hurt him, right? Doesn't mean he's incompetent. He's just kind of odd. And so yeah, here's the items. This is a large study of highly paid executives. The average pay is $193K. If you respect differences, if you value working with different types of people, and are comfortable managing diverse employees, so your peers say this is like everybody should do this, right? Like these are good people things to do. Respect people, value them, be comfortable managing. So if your peers say you're good at this, it hurts you if you're a woman or minority. So you should, and actually the best performance ratings were given to people whose peers said they don't respect differences, they don't value working with different types of people, and they're not comfortable managing diverse employees. We did an experiment, same thing. Everybody is judged extremely harshly for advocating for somebody who looks like themselves, unless you're a white guy, unless you're a David or a John or Robert or a Steve. I can advocate for other Davids, John, Steves, Roberts all day long, and people think, oh yeah, he's picking the best guy. But if a woman advocates for a woman or a minority advocates for a minority, actually even the other way, if a minority advocates for a woman or a woman advocates for a minority, same thing, it's bad. There's white men and there's everybody else in people's minds, and basically the worst performing white man is still better than the best performing woman or minority. That's the latent, no one can really say that out loud. It's horrible to say, but that's the belief, and that's what's driving this effect. So all right, so we've got, here's the wrap up of the diversity piece, then we get to inclusion. We know unconscious bias affects what we see. We can't hide. We need systems and accountability, and it has to be from the top. And so if we do this, it actually, we're going to make more money. I mean, that's the thing. Diversity isn't about fair, it's about better, right? I mean, Julie Imig always says that, the former head of the Women's Council, and she's right on. It's not about fair at all. Who cares? You're not going to sell anybody on the right thing to do, but it's about better. We're going to get better people, the best people out of 100, not out of 35, and we're going to have more ideas, and we're going to have more innovation, and we're going to make more money. Okay, so that's great. We got Michael Jordan on our team, but what if we exclude him? What if we never pass him the ball? What if we, here's the nug-nugs here, what if we only pass the ball to people with even-numbered jerseys? It's not many people, right? You got number 12, 14, 8, 0, 6. Yeah, that's it. And everyone's like, why can't dude, can I change my number? Nope, you're stuck at 35. You're never going to get the ball. Sorry. And so now what? Michael Jordan's really pissed because he's like, dude, I run up and down the court and nobody passes me the ball. I'm wide open. They know I'm not going to, like, this is the obvious thing. We could make so many points here. And then the other 4 guys are like, this sucks. You know what sucks about diversity is we used to have 5 guys on the team. Now we have 4 and we can't pass to the 5th guy. So it's always 4 on 5 and we're always losing. This is just dumb. Like, see, diversity sucks. So everybody's pissed, right? It doesn't work. And so that's where inclusion is the key. So we have exclusion, and it's no good. It's like it's worse than not having them on the team. Okay, so quiz time. How does exclusion feel? You want to launch that one, Sam?
Yes, let's go ahead and launch it. So the question is, what happened to make you feel excluded at work? You were the only person on a team without a certain degree, like an MBA, an engineering degree. You were the only person of your gender or race on a team. You were much older or younger than everyone else on your team. You were new to the team and everyone else was there a long time. None of these, but they excluded you for some other reason. It looks like we've got about 50% of folks who have answered, so we'll give it a few more seconds.
And this, by the way, is how, if you're trying to get inclusion on your team, ask this question. Because we've all felt excluded at some point. I mean, I'm giving you no option if I've never felt excluded, because a lot of white guys actually don't think it's okay to say they feel excluded. But they have. I can tell you, like the last one picked for a team.
All right, and it looks like we have everyone's answers in, so let's go ahead and take a look at the answers here. So Dave, we've got almost a tie. 34 and 32% say that they were the only person of their gender or race on the team, or they were much older or younger than everyone else on the team. And then coming in second was none of the above, but they were excluded for some other reason. So if you were none of the above, if you want to go ahead and type that into the chat.
Yeah, that'd be fascinating.
We can elaborate on those, yeah.
So,
all right,
so you
I'll
said
give it back to you.
Half were B and C? Or
about 66% were B and C.
Okay, so 2/3
yeah,
B and C.
a little more than half.
And then the third most common was none.
Yep,
okay,
so 18% was none of the above.
That's awesome. I mean, terrible, sad, but it's kind of really fascinating. So age and race, gender are the big. It's obvious. It hits you right in the face. And so yeah, this question actually is how you build inclusion. It's like, guess what? It sucks for me. I'm a white guy, and I've played on basketball teams, and I sucked, and I felt like I was such a loser, and right? I mean, or I was the only person with a PhD in the room, and I felt like a geek, or I was the only person without a PhD in the room, uh, and I felt like a loser. And like people, we exclude. That's what everybody does. It's like human nature. And so once you get people to say, "Yeah, I hated it. Yeah, I hated it," why are we doing it to each other? Right? Nobody likes this. And so that's a powerful way to build inclusion. Okay, so then what do? We're in these meetings and we feel excluded. Amplification is what the women in the Obama administration did. So you can see look how mad they are. They're like, he's not listening to me. She's mad too. And it's like, what can you do, right? And these women are like, all right, let's be positive. So what's supposed to happen and what our society sets up is that the women are basically should beg for scraps from the big boy table. There's a real conversation among the white guys and the president, the leader, and basically you just tell the leader what he wants to hear, and then the women are basically excluded from it. They're not real. It's like you first listen to the top white guys, and then the women minorities are after that in the pecking order. And so they got sick of it, and so women started saying, "Hey, I'm going to amplify this other woman's ideas." So, hey, did you hear what Kelly just said? That's great. Did you hear what Sam just said? She's had a great idea. And so it was this really counter-normative, like we're helping each other. It's a revolutionary act. It's supposed to be very competitive, not cooperative in these meetings. Like we're fighting for airtime, we're fighting for our ideas to get heard. Whereas women were cooperating and not competing. That's pretty bizarre. That's inclusion among women, and that's the first step. And so here's a really cool picture of, I don't know, amplifying women with megaphone. All right, so yeah, it's not just a volume problem. It's a culture problem. So it's not enough. You can't just include other women, right? You can't just have minorities including minorities. Like that actually is socially competitive in a way. So yeah, men and white men specifically can now hear women, but they can't risk their social rank to help. So there's this pecking order. Every white guy knows where they are on the pecking order. The boss is at the top, whether they're man, woman, minority, majority. The boss is always at the top, and then your goal is to tell the boss what they want to hear. And so you risk your social rank if you go down the ladder, if you acknowledge a woman. So it's like women are like, what? This guy's stealing my ideas. They don't even view it as stealing. Like women aren't even real is how they view it. It's like women aren't even in the conversation. They're not in the pecking order. And so in the lowest, the man below you is really doesn't exist. You can steal his ideas. You can always steal the idea of the person below you, and then the boss wants to take the idea from the highest person because then that doesn't risk his status, and he's afraid. Typically, he. So yeah, it is this pecking order, this corporate straitjacket that men basically, if they're honest, a lot of them will say they don't like it. So yeah, blink twice if you need help. It's like Melania. All right, so here's Margaret Heffernan, and she's in the Silicon Valley, and she has this cool TED talk about forget the pecking order. Any problem can be solved in 17 minutes if you ask the right person. Like someone has the answer to your problem. And so it's just all about cooperation. And so she talks about this really cool experiment like some researcher did with chickens. Performance of chickens is easy. It's how many eggs they lay. So they just had average chickens and super chickens. The researchers took the super chicken from each tribe or clan and then put them all together and then waited 5 generations. And actually the average chickens far outperform the super chickens. Actually, the super chickens killed each other. There are only 3 that survived because super chickens perform well by suppressing the performance of everyone else around them. And so they poison the waters, right? They peck each other to death to try to get the highest performance. Whereas the regular chickens just hang out and keep growing, and each generation they produce a few more eggs. And that's the idea. Cooperation wins. That's the idea of inclusion, of passing everybody the ball. And there's a MIT and a Carnegie Mellon study of teams, and the best teams they found had 3 things: lots of empathy. It really didn't matter the IQ of the smartest person. It didn't matter the average IQ of the team. It was like empathy, equal time talking, even no matter what position you are on the team, high, low, medium. We're not just trying to guess what the boss wants to hear. We're actually thinking. We're actually talking. And then lots of women. This could be overlap. Women do tend to score a little bit higher in empathy. But it's equality and listening, and not necessarily just talking all the time. All right, so yeah, 2 brains with different perspectives are better than 1 really smart one with 1 perspective. That's the whole idea here, why cooperation beats competition. So at competition, we're just trying to peck each other to death. We're trying to win by suppressing other people's performance. Whereas cooperation, we're just trying to hang out and do our job. Lay some eggs, you know? So inclusion best practices: be the host. Include first. This idea is women could come to the meeting first, and instead of having talk about sports or whatever the typical alpha person in the pecking order talks about, like talk about a restaurant, or try to include everybody. Get that baseline foundation of inclusion going with everybody. Because men, I'm telling you, men are sick of sports. I've done this at basketball, at beers after basketball. Like, all right, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of just talking about scores. None of us care. Let's talk about something we all care about. Let's talk about life, kids, marriage. And that's all we want to talk about now. That's more fun than basketball in many ways. So then name the pecking order dynamic. So just call it out. It's like, oh, we're going to do the pecking order game. That's what one woman in a talk said. She actually called it out at her organization. Oh, I didn't know we were just going to tell the boss what he wants to hear. All right, cool. I can play that game. And then it's like, no, we don't want to do that. We actually want to think. We want to talk. And then if you're a woman or a low minority, I said low status. Basically, that's how we view it in the research literature. There's high status white men and then low status everybody else. Unfortunately, that's the reality of the situation. So if you are low status, you can include the boss. So if you direct your idea, hey Chuck, hey David, I got this idea. Then you're giving the boss this choice. Am I going to include someone who's very far down the pecking order? Because it's a risky move for the boss. Like, then does this make me look weak, or are we going to switch the dynamic and change the whole culture to be more cooperative? And yeah, you include the women, include the minorities, as well as the men, as well as the majority members. And it's sad. I mean, people have said, well, why do minorities have to be the one doing the inclusion? Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe we get lucky. Maybe from these talks, maybe more white guys decided to take the risk and risk their pecking order position to help. I hope so, and that's why I'm doing this. All right, thanks. So questions?
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. And just as a reminder, if you do have any questions, you can still ask those through the chat interface. So one question for you, Dave, and this actually was one of those top answers on the poll. So have you seen any trends, or do you have any information on how age inclusion fits into all of this?
It's the same thing, so it's going to be status. So and age is weird because sometimes in more tech industries, maybe like if it's a startup, maybe younger people are going to have more status. In more established industries, the older people might have more status. It's whoever has the status, it's going to be essentially the white man. Whoever has low status is going to be everybody else. And so there's like the real conversation and the real people, and then the support, right? I mean, it's like and so it's going to be the same with that as well.
Okay, great, thank you. And another question here. So they're saying, as an organization, they're good at hiring women and minorities, but they have a hard time with the retention of their diverse talent. So do you have any advice on what could be done?
It's all about that inclusion. So it's like you're getting them on the team. You got Michael Jordan, but then how do you include? And that is the trick. Like, that's the culture change that needs to happen. And so many women in these talks and minorities are like, that's why I started my own business. I felt like my contributions weren't appreciated at the big corporation. And so that's the trick. And so it would be awesome if you, I mean, we could have a mechanism for generating inclusion. Part of it is you got to sit around, you got to ask people, think of a time you felt excluded. It's not good, and people have to really believe that a cooperation culture is better than a competition culture, because most of corporate America is competition. At Pepsi, it's like they get yelled at if they don't. Their boss is like, "Why did you go to this meeting? You didn't say anything. You had no contribution." Or if they say something, it wasn't like widely appreciated. It's like, well, you know, why did you say that dumb comment at the meeting? Make me look bad. So it's all about how much we talk, and it's not about how much we listen and how much we care. And so that's the big change right there, is switching from competition to cooperation, and that is not an easy task.
And thank you so much. These are great answers.
No,
so
thank you.
We have, yeah, we've got some more in here that are awesome. So this individual has heard senior leadership in organizations shy away from creating concrete goals around diversity because they're concerned about legality. And so do you ever encounter this with other companies that you work with? And if so, how often, and how do you recommend they address it?
Yeah, so they a lot of them have, you know, they're 50-50 by 2020, you know, their goals, and then they inevitably don't get them. I think a lot of it's because of the inclusion, and so like that's the other thing, is executives don't want to fail, they don't want to look bad. Also, there's this, it's like this secret, nobody wants to share what their numbers actually are. So if you have a goal, then you have to say where you're at. And I'll tell you right now, every tech company is at 20% female, 10% executive female, basically, and they're all just so embarrassed to say it. They're at like very few, if you're not counting East Asian, but like like Latino, African American, they're about 1 to 2%. And they don't want to say that, right? They're like, our goal is to get to 5%. I mean, it just but if you don't measure it, it's never going to happen. So yeah, that every company feels like they have this big bad secret that they can't tell anyone else about, and they can't benchmark. It's stupid, and I don't know what to do. I mean it's like it's like we need a day where we're like, all right, let's all tell at the same time that we all have the exact same numbers, you know. And then it could be out there, then we can start measuring it. But it's almost like we need a network, we need an industry-wide effort, because it's like, I don't want to be and then they announce, it's like, I don't want to be the one that's the worst, so everybody else has 2% African Americans, I have 0, you know, then I'm last place. So it's tricky. It is very sensitive, those numbers. I don't have an answer. I bet somebody on this call does, though.
Great, thank you. And one other question here. So looking for some recommendations in navigating casual conversations at work in which you feel excluded. So for example, whether it's marital status or difference in age, or even difference in background. Do you have any recommendations on navigating those conversations where you start to feel included in the workplace?
Ooh, that's tough. That's a really good question. So if to understand the question correctly, basically, you feel like an outsider, you feel excluded. Is there a way to get included? I mean, they got to want it, right? It's like the excluding parties need to want, because the harder you try with exclusion, the more excluded you get. You know, it's like, oh, look at that try hard over there, the wannabe. And so it's really got to be this, like, we want a cooperative culture. We want you. We need difference, and that's the trick. And so the data I've got is like, basically, if you have the more diversity you have, the worse you're going to perform if you have no inclusion, because it's going to be this culture of fear. Everybody's hiding their difference. Everybody's hiding they're trying to just fit in and be like, oh yeah, I saw that movie. Oh yeah, I was totally cool in high school like you. And I'm like, it's dumb, right? Instead of where it's different, it's like, yeah, I'm really different. I like playing Pokemon. Yeah, I'm really different. I watch HGTV and I love it. And I watched Meerkat Manor, and on this show they did this, and maybe we could apply that here. Or I don't know. Just I have ideas. I have a different background. I don't just watch sports. I don't just do what I'm supposed to do. And so that's is like, are we afraid of difference? Are we squishing difference, or are we embracing difference? And that's inclusion. And if we embrace difference, then we learn. That's what I've found across 500 teams around the world. The more difference we have with inclusion, when it's combined with inclusion, leads to more learning and much better team performance. But that is the trick. It's like we need it. We need we need to just get rid of the competition pecking order and switch to cooperation, equality. And that almost, I don't know, maybe it has to come from the top. Really good questions. Anything else?
We do have a couple more questions, and I agree that these ones are great. So we had one question come in. You had talked about negotiating salaries specifically with female and male, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit. So do you, in the research you've done, do you feel like eliminating that negotiation altogether will equalize salaries, or do you have any advice or anything you want to elaborate around that?
Yeah, basically, yeah, negotiating helps men, it doesn't help women. And so that's the problem, right? I mean, it's just like, so there's it doesn't help. So if we want to get rid of the pay inequality, then we want to get rid of negotiations. So I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know what else, like what to say more. It's yeah, I wish I could be more eloquent on that one, but I don't know. Like,
no worries. These are
yeah.
tough topics. These are hard things to think about, hard things for companies to talk about, definitely. So one more question here for you. Businesses reflect larger power and oppression dynamics in society. Is change in the business sector possible while other institutions perpetuate these issues we've been talking about today?
Wait, can you repeat that one?
Yeah, sure. So businesses often reflect larger power and oppression dynamics in society. So is change in the business sector, do you feel like change in the business sector is possible while other institutions are still perpetuating these issues that we're talking about?
Other institutions, well, I wonder what those would be.
Yeah, so if I understand the question correctly, I think it's saying if this is still largely happening, do other businesses that want to make these changes, do they have the opportunity? Is it harder? Do you foresee them being able to be successful in making these changes?
That's okay. So other institutions, I mean, you look at what happened with sports. I mean, it was quick. It was just like, wow, we want to win. And we want the best players, and so they got them, right? I mean, so it was a quick change toward, I guess, diversity, but really toward quality, toward better play, toward better team members. And the same thing I think we're going to see in business. Other institutions would be government, social ones, families. I think it could happen. I mean, as long as wherever performance is really easy to measure, you're going to see it happen. The trick is power. Like, how do you convince people to give up power? That is really, if you figure that out, then you can get more towards efficiency. But like management journals, as professors, we've been teaching people, you got to empower your employees to get much better results. Empower them, give them actual power, decision-making authority. And managers are like, yeah, sure. Never do it. Why? Why would I give up power? Like, then I lose power. And so people view it as zero sum. But if there is actual, like, this team empowered their employees and they are kicking our butts, dang, we should do it. Like the head coach, Bear Bryant of Alabama, he was like, he intentionally played USC, who had African-American football players, because he wanted to get African-American football players on Alabama's team. And so he lost. He lost like 58-3. It wasn't even close. Then that got him permission to get African American players, and they actually beat USC the following season. So that was, I mean, that's the beauty of sports, right? It's really clear who's winning. But you still have the stock market. You have, we have performance measures, and to the extent you can measure it and you can measure who's winning, the teams that empower and the teams that are more egalitarian and cooperative, they're going to win. Other questions or?
Great. Yeah, thank you. So I know we asked a question earlier about age and inclusion of age in the workplace, but we've had a couple more questions come in. One specifically is, how do you overcome being overlooked because of age, both by management and coworkers?
How do you overcome being overlooked because of age? Oh, I mean, yeah, so this is like feeling excluded because of age, whether it's too young, too old. That's the weird thing about age, is like you really don't know what age means. Like which one's the high status. And so how do you get in? And let's say you're different. Everybody's young and you're old, or everybody's old and you're young. That's this question. How do you get people to give up power? Whether the young people have the power or the older people have the power. How do you do it? How do you get people to say it's not a zero-sum game? If I win, you lose. If you win, I lose. Because really, the pie gets bigger. When we get the best people on the team, it gets bigger. And that's what I've tried to do with this sports thing, with the basketball. It's like the 53 championship team, they couldn't beat the worst team in the NBA today, right? The worst, absolute worst team would crush them. Because we got more diverse, we got more inclusive, we got better. I mean, we have the best people now, bigger, stronger, faster. And so that's what's going to happen. We're going to, and the revenues are way bigger for the NBA now than it was back in the 50s. That's what's going to happen to our companies if we believe. And I don't know. But yeah, it's like people need to say, hey, it's not zero sum. So I'm not really giving up power. I'm going to get a smaller piece of a bigger pie, and it's going to work out. But that is a tough sell.
Yeah, agree. And so, Dave, one more question for you before we close out the webinar here. You've given us all such great information today. And the question is, if there's one thing that we could all go back and do, one thing that we could do, one thing that we could change that we're doing in our work every day, what would you suggest that be?
Oh, that's easy. Blind it. Like, and especially with those poll questions. So if we go up from 20% or whatever, 10% of our applicants come through blind selection processes, let's double it. And then let's make sure we include them. Let's start talking about cooperation. Let's start talking about how we care about each other. And all it takes is one pocket of resistance, and then people are going to start noticing once you win. So that's the one thing. Blind it, and then really go out of your way to include those people.
Great. Well, thank you so much again, and thank you everyone for joining today's presentation. This really was such great information. To view upcoming webinars and request previous recordings, please visit our website at www.colorado.edu/alumni/webinars. We hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and go Buffs!
Yeah, thank you all. This was fun. You're amazing.